Bears are strong and formidable creatures, capable of instilling fear with their mere appearance. And when they behave aggressively, nothing good can come of it. This amazing predator can attack hunters, chase cyclists, attack locals, and even trap people in mountains and trees. In this issue, we'll show you scary bear incidents that you better not face alone. From an incredible attack on a photographer to a bear encounter with a forester. Click the like button and subscribe right now. Welcome to Wild Assault. Today's story takes place in Bellecourt, a valley in British Columbia. It stretches 80 kilometers across Canada and is known as a very scenic region with a diverse landscape of meadows, forests, mountains, and rivers. There is truly something for everyone here. The area is picturesque, but the name tropical forest is given in honor of the many wildlife species that live here, especially cougars, wolves, and of course bears. But these bears are special. This region is home to a unique subspecies of black bear, the Kermode bear, also known as the spirit bear. This is because 1/10 of cubs are born with a recessive gene that results in white fur as a result of the unique habitat. The Great Bear Rainforest is protected by the UK government. As of 2016, industrial logging has ceased in Colombia, meaning that 85% of the forest will be preserved. Given that the population of Bellecourt is only 2,100, this means that there is approximately one bear for every 2 residents in the area. Despite this, bear attacks are quite rare. The bears usually coexist peacefully, but there have been events that have changed this situation forever. In 2018, Jordan Carberry was working as a park ranger at Bellecourt. Jordan was responsible for the security and maintenance of the park, as well as ensuring the safety of visitors. He patrolled the park grounds to check for any unusual events, monitored visitor safety by enforcing park rules. He loved his job, it was interesting, and it was such a beautiful place to work. As he was returning home after a wonderful vacation with friends, he approached his house and saw 2 grizzly bears climbing a nearby cherry tree. The cherries were already ripe, and bears are known to be cherry eaters. The bears were looking for food and had no intention of harming anyone around them. The next morning, Jordan woke up and started to get ready for work as usual, but something caught his eye through the window. He saw 2 bears in a tree, not to scare them, but just to take a picture. He ran downstairs with his camera and left the house to take the picture and show it to his friends. He was an avid photographer, and living in a beautiful place allowed him to take great pictures of everyday life. He went out into the orchard, figuring that if he kept quiet, they wouldn't mind him, and he could get some good shots of them eating cherries. While he was watching the bears, one of them fell out of a tree. He thought it was funny, and suddenly something stirred near Jordan. It was a very large female bear. She heard the cub crying when she saw Jordan and thought it was his fault. He knew he was in big trouble. She headed in Jordan's direction and ran straight for him. Jordan had been trained to deal with grizzly bears, and deep down she knew she should play dead. But instinct took over. He turned and ran. He didn't want to see the 500-pound killing machine again. Jordan was not far from the house and thought he could get through the door before the bear attacked and killed him. Just 3 feet from the door, the bear struck him in the back with one of its huge paws, knocking him to the ground. He tried to get up, but the bear immediately jumped on him, grabbed his head, and tried to crush his skull with its strong jaws. Jordan fell to the floor, blinded by the pain. Blood splattered in all directions, and he thought he could crawl away. However, the bear wouldn't let him go, continuing to clutch his head in its jaws. Jordan tried to defend himself, hitting the bear with his fists and feet, but his strength was running out. He realized that his chances of escape were dwindling with each passing second. He felt his consciousness slowly fogging up from lack of oxygen, while pain and fatigue enveloped his body. Fear and despair made him shiver, but he didn't give up. Jordan's strength was depleting faster than he could have imagined. He cursed his carelessness and recklessness that had led him to this situation. But at the same time, he never stopped fighting. He knew there was a chance, even if it was a small one. He gathered his remaining strength and struck the bear in the eye with his fist. The animal let go of him and recoiled back in blinding pain. This was the moment Jordan had been preparing for all along. Without thinking, he jumped to his feet and ran without looking back. Each step sapped the remnants of his strength, but he couldn't stop. He ran into the house and managed to close the door, but he knew that this door was very thin and could easily be broken by an animal with just a few blows. He thought the bear would enter the house and try to kill him, but it didn't. The bear took the cub and went back into the woods, leaving Jordan wounded. Although Jordan was grateful to the bear for leaving him alone, he now faced another problem: surviving his extensive injuries. He lived very far away. There were no houses nearby, and the phone didn't work to call for help. He had no choice but to find a way to escape. He managed to grab the keys to his car upstairs. The adrenaline from the attack was slowly wearing off, but he knew that if he lost consciousness, he passed out, he'd never wake up again. He was resolute in his decision to get to the hospital. He realized that time was now working against him and every second mattered. His hands were shaking, but he gathered all his strength and stepped forward. His heart was beating hard and relentless. It seemed as if it was competing with his breathing. However, he couldn't allow himself to stop and give in to panic. No matter what was happening, he just had to get to help. After I left the house and slowly but surely made my way to my car, I realized that my condition was critical. Then, all of a sudden, a bear appeared in front of me, ready to end me for good. However, I managed to get into the car before she could hit me. Although she tried to get me out of the car, she failed. The bear realized she couldn't get inside the car and stepped back, leaving the man safe. He couldn't believe he had survived this situation. He shook his hands violently, trying to cope with the shock and fear that still encompassed him. He started the car and began to move, carrying the hardest and most frightening ride of his life. His head was spinning, and sometimes he almost lost consciousness. As he was driving a manual transmission, he pressed on the pedals, feeling unbearable pain, despite the severe wounds that were causing him great pain. He continued to pray, hoping to see his family and survive. He managed to get to a local hospital, from where he was immediately airlifted to a Vancouver hospital. He had to undergo multiple surgeries to save his life. His right ear was torn off, half of his scalp was damaged. He had several complicated wounds from where the bear tried to tear him apart. He had a long road to recovery, but he was just grateful to be alive. He considered it a blessing, considered it his blessing that she didn't catch him that last time he walked to the car. He recognizes that the bear's attack was entirely his fault, for he should not have risked his life just for a few pictures. He was lucky to survive, and he has made a full recovery. An engineer for a Vancouver logging company thought he was going to die yesterday when a mother grizzly bear tore into his arm and back and tried to toss him into the air. But George Knoll, 41, survived thanks to quick thinking, work boots, and luck. He had an eye for conservation and worked hard to ensure his actions had minimal impact on the ecosystem. George Knoll, working a normal workday, was sent by the director to check the area for possible problems and improvements. George was given detailed instructions and a list of tasks to complete. George started his inspection at the sawmill, where he checked the condition of the equipment and found several faults. He immediately contacted the technical department so that they could promptly resolve the problems and avoid delays in operations. He then went to the logging site to assess the logging process. He noticed that some trees were improperly cut and could pose a danger to workers. George immediately reported to the logging team leader and asked them to be more careful. As the forester walked along the creek, he failed to notice the slippery stone surface and slipped. He fell toward a steep ledge. However, thanks to the spikes on his boots, he was able to grab onto a tree branch, saving himself from falling. Realizing that without the spikes, he would not have been able to hold on. After that, the forester used his spiked boots always when doing his job. Even on wet and slippery terrain, he could move steadily without fear of falling or injury. The spikes saved him the second time, too. A mother grizzly bear attacked the engineer. At about 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, he looked up and saw a mother grizzly bear and her cub. Knoll had never encountered a mother bear before, but his coworker had once encountered her and her cub. Fortunately, he saw them from a safe distance and quickly ran away, avoiding danger. However, the bear cub spotted him and tried to chase him down. From then on, Knoll was more cautious in his closest encounters with animals and always remembered to keep a safe distance. He understood that safety should be a top priority in his interactions with the animal world. But that day, even the most cautious would not have noticed her. It was as if she had fallen out of the sky. Over the sound of rushing water, he didn't hear the bear and her cub approaching through the shrubbery, nor did the bear hear him until they were only 6 meters apart. Knoll knew he was in trouble because of the cub, Knoll said Friday from his hospital bed in Vancouver. Knoll said he tried to run backwards to get away from the bear, but she pounced on him faster than he could think. She grabbed him as hard as if a car was spinning into you at 100 kilometers per h, he said. Knoll tried to play dead, curling up in a ball and covering his neck with his arms, but her teeth sank into his arms and back as she tried to toss him like a rag doll. He was in acute pain, but continued to maintain his pose without opening his eyes. His only hope was that she would soon tire and back off. But she was too fierce to stop. Her strength and aggression were unrivaled. Finally, he couldn't stand it and cried out in pain. Her teeth penetrated deeper into his skin, causing a sensation of fire. He tried to break free of her grip, but she only squeezed his body tighter. He felt a great sadness and bitterness in his heart, realizing that he would never be able to spend time with the people he loved again unless he was saved. It flashed in his mind what moments he had missed, how much joy and happiness they could have shared together. He regretted every unspoken love, every unspoken "I love you." It all became an unspeakable pain, but he knew that they would always remain in his heart, even if he left. He realized that he would not just lie there and wait for death, he would fight to the end. The bear's face was so close to his face that Knoll could feel her breath. He distinctly remembered the foul odor of that bear's mouth. It smelled like rotten fish. The odor was so strong that Knoll thought he was going to vomit. He realized that pretending to be dead wasn't going to work. At that moment, he realized that he had better do something, so he kicked her in the face with such force that it could have felled a tree. Knoll kicked the bear twice in the face with his boulder boots, the heavy, studded work boots often worn by loggers. There was blood on her muzzle, but Knoll didn't know if it was hers or his own. Knoll tried to fend off the blows, but the bear was stronger and still gave him several hard blows with her paws. Knoll felt pain and bleeding, but he did not give up. He continued to fight back, realizing that he could not retreat. He realized that this was a fight for his life, and he would have to fight to the last man. Suddenly, Knoll noticed that the bear was getting tired. Her attacks were becoming slower and less powerful. Knoll decided to take advantage of this moment and gave her several strong blows with his boot. The bear let out a loud roar, bounced back and retreated some distance. Knoll realized that his attacks had had an effect, and he decided not to stop. He swung his fist, screaming loudly. He became frantic. The bear started to run into the forest, and Knoll kept screaming. He was in a state of shock, but eventually, the adrenaline started to subside, and he started to feel the pain from the wounds he had received after the bear attack. He sat down on the ground, and his eyes began to roll, but help came quickly. Knoll radioed his partner to inform him of the attack and used a pressure bandage belt as a tourniquet on his left arm to stop the bleeding. He remembers deliriously walking 200 meters uphill to the helipad, where a work crew helicopter took him to Bella Bella and then flew him to Vancouver. During the flight, he was able to call his wife. He told her he loved her. His wounds were quite serious and required a long course of treatment. Knoll was first taken to a nearby hospital where he received first aid. His wounds were cleaned and stitched up to prevent infection. After that, Knoll was given a course of antibiotics to prevent any possible infections. He also received regular injections for pain and took pain medication to ease discomfort. Knoll uses his experience to warn others about the importance of caution in the wild and how to act appropriately in the event of an encounter with a wild animal. He is also grateful to the medical staff who saved his life and helped him recover. According to Sergeant Len Butler of the BC Conservation Service, Knoll felt fine at the Vancouver hospital. He suffered stab wounds but no serious internal injuries. Because the mother bear had a cub with her, they consider the attack defensive, meaning she was not trying to attack the engineer and she will not be killed. He's a very lucky man. He's going to be in a lot of pain, but he's a very lucky man, Butler said. If the bear wanted to kill the victim, she would have done it. Jeremy Evans was in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta in Canada in the summer of 2017 and came across a grizzly bear with her cub. At first, Jeremy was captivated by the beauty and wildlife of the area. He spent dozens of hours hunting, observing different species of animals, but none of his experiences compared to what he saw that day. A grizzly bear and her cub were circling a pond trying to catch fish. They were completely immersed in their work, not noticing Jeremy. The nature lover decided to come out of his ambush and get closer to them to take some pictures. Carefully making his way through the bushes, Jeremy noticed every movement of the bears. He realized that such proximity to dangerous beasts could be deadly. But his love of nature was stronger than fear. He knew very well that such an opportunity to see bears not every day is given. After a while, he walked away unnoticed. The grizzly bear is the term used for the brown bear in North America. There are several subspecies and varieties, the most famous of which is the Kodiak bear. He kept thinking about that encounter and was very glad he wasn't scared and approached. The next day he went out for a walk. He raised his binoculars and watched the sheep. After a while he lowered the binoculars and noticed a small brown creature running in front of him about 10 feet away. He immediately knew it was a bear cub and thought, "Oh shit, where's Mommy?" But his question was answered all too quickly when he heard a branch break behind him. Before he realized it, the bear attacked. It jumped on top of him. It was instantaneous. He stepped back and tried to reach for his gun, but the bear was too fast for him. He felt a sharp pain as the bear's mighty paw struck him in the face. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. The bear pounced on him, its toothy maw flashing before his eyes. He tried to defend himself. The bear's teeth pierced his skin, and he felt the blood begin to drain from the wound. She bit his face as he lay on his side. He was caught by her two front fangs, one in the corner of his eye and the other below his jaw. Evans began to fight back, gouging out the bear's eyes and even putting his hand down her throat to try and defend himself in any way he could. Crawling around in a panic looking for his gun, he tried to look in his backpack but was unable to do so because of his serious injuries. His left eye had fallen out of his eye socket, so he had to lift it or tilt his head back to see. His right eye was pressed into his skull. Evans was attacked at 9:36 a.m., but it wasn't until the evening of that day that he began receiving medical attention. When the 300-pound finally retreated, Evans's frantic journey to seek help began. Immediately after the attack, he began rappelling down the mountainside, but ended up falling several hundred feet. He was pretty much mangled up there and couldn't really move. At that point, Evans decided to give up, he admitted. But they had recently had a baby girl who was 6 months old at the time, and that gave him the strength to get up and crawl out of there. It took Evans nearly 8 hours to get to the nearest apartment building where he finally got help. The first person to see him was a 9-year-old boy. Evans was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, his head wrapped in toilet paper, his hands bandaged, and he walked into the house, slightly hunched over. He said he needed help and that he had been attacked by a bear. The residents rushed to Evans for help, shocked by his horrific injuries. The family had a helipad behind the house, and they arranged for a rescue helicopter to take him to the nearest emergency room. They came and told him the helicopter would be there in about half an hour. The helicopter took Evans to a small emergency room nearby, where they quickly decided to transfer him to Calgary, where, he recalls, there was construction work going on, and he had to walk through the main entrance past other patients waiting to be seen. His entire family was there. Evans spent 5 weeks in the hospital and admits he was in pretty bad shape. Because part of his skull plate was exposed, he had to undergo multiple surgeries, including skin grafts and facial reconstruction. But even that, Evans took it with great humor. They asked him if he wanted to cut his hair and they could move it over here and everything. He said no, that would be better. He'd get a half-price haircut. He laughed. Back to work full-time, just 7 weeks after the attack, his injuries are incredibly minimal today. Don't unnecessarily give up your hobbies in life. But family comes first. There are some things that aren't quite the same. For example, his pinky finger sticks out when he closes his palm. Oh, And his eyes don't close completely and I don't have tear ducts. Just 48 hours after he was discharged from the hospital, he headed back to the ranch to thank the people who helped him when he was in trouble. And while he was there, he even did a little hunting. He hunted 48 hours after he was released from the hospital, he said. You know how by setting small goals you can accomplish incredible things. Don't unnecessarily give up on your passions in life, and family comes first. Despite his miraculous recovery, Evans still talks openly about the difficulties that arose after the attack as well. As a result of the ordeal, he developed severe PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and required psychiatric support. When he was in the hospital that first day, he sought psychiatric help. Even years later, the PTSD remained constant. He would wake up with nightmares. He had to have someone with him in the hospital 24/7 because if he had flashbacks, they were pretty violent, he said. But after undergoing therapy, which Evans describes as a kind of witchcraft, he found a way out and today hopes his story can inspire others in their own struggles. Seeking mental health help is not a sign of weakness. Like it's a sign of strength, Evans said. After the attack, the 9-year-old boy who first saw Evans when he sought help was assigned to write about his hero in school. He chose Evans despite the hardships. Evans has not given up. He loves his family and will do anything to protect them from any dangers and obstacles. His love for his family gives him the strength and motivation to fight and not give up. Whether it's financial difficulties, work, or health problems, Evans will always stand up for his family and do everything he can to keep them safe and happy. He is willing to overcome all challenges and make any sacrifice for his loved ones. For Evans, family is the most precious and important thing in his life, and he will not allow any circumstances to destroy this holy union.